Hello and welcome to the Minority Arts Appreciation Society podcast, where we're ticking all the boxes and bringing a minority perspective to popular internet discourse. Today, continuing our spooky extravaganza, on Disney Channel Halloween specials, where we're doing clippings. There existed an addiction to blood, released in 2019.
Oh yeah.
I'm Josh. My pronouns are he and him. I lead the music discussions.
I'm Tilly, my pronouns are she and her, and I lead the film discussions.
And yeah, no preamble today. We can just get right
Because
into it.
it's just fucking clipping.
Tilly, what? It's clipping B word. What's your history with clipping?
I first got into clipping in 2020 when no Visions of Bodies Being Burned dropped. And people said it was really good, and I'd been wanting to listen to clipping for a long time, and so I threw it on, and I really like it. Well, at the time, I loved it. Like I thought it was fantastic and like something really special. And like it is the album that got me. It still is the album that got me into clipping. I mean, I say that, but I've now still only heard these last two albums, which makes me feel like a bit of a like clipping poser, but I'm not. Obviously. Well. Uh, so yeah, I've just heard these two. Well, not these two because we're not discussing both. We're just talking about their existing addiction to blood. But yeah, this year I listened to their existing addiction to blood because I feel like it is wrong on some level to have only heard Visions of Bodies Being Burned, which I think you have validly described as B-sides to this album, which it probably is. I think they're just very good B-sides, a lot of them. But yeah, so yeah, it's a short but sweet history of clipping because ever since I love what they're doing. I've only heard two of their projects, like I said, but I just love what they're about. I think they're very special.
Yeah, I do think that like this duology of there existed an addiction and Visions of Bodies Being Burnt do you feel like sort of a its own little island in the clipping discography. It's not that the stuff they did before this was like radically different, but you know, this feels like to clipping what say like the Berlin trilogy feels like for Bowie. Like that feels like its own little island in the Bowie discography. Um not that I have a great preference. I do my favorite I do still prefer Self-Titled and Splendor and Misery to
Uh-huh.
these two albums. But yeah, they definitely feel like like a special evening type thing, like unique
Yeah.
projects from clipping. Yeah, I got into them with around the release of Splendor and Misery, I want to say 2016. Um, I really loved that album when it came out. It's a concept album about a space slave ship. Uh, it's wonderful. It's very good. I
Sounds
remember
awesome.
quite embarrassingly, me and my friend were quite into Hamilton at the time when it was quite new in a pre-Trump world, I may add. It was. I feel like the general feelings about America were not, especially as a 15 or 16-year-old, not as quite as full of animosity as they are now. And yeah, David
Mm.
Diggs, like it was this weird thing of like geeking out over Hamilton and clipping at the same time with my friends because we both just really like David Diggs.
The two
Uh,
sides.
exactly. So yeah, and then sixth one I got really into self-titled, which is a fantastic project.
Mm.
And you definitely see ripples of that here. Yeah, just kept listening to albums as they came out. Really,
Yeah.
normal fan stuff. Um,
Yeah. I
yeah,
think that what you said about them being an island is what has me paranoid about feeling like a clipping poser because it's I feel like yeah there is a distinction between
mm,
very much those eras of their discography, especially with just these albums
yeah,
being like the most popular they have. Like these are the albums that I see most people talk about online and
mm,
like what got them in like popular music
Yeah.
discussion circles, I feel like.
I guess that makes sense. They are the most kind of conceptual of the albums. Pleasure and Misery is very conceptual, but also like maybe errs a bit too much towards like, there's no actual instruments on the album. It's just like weird samples of like noise things plus like literal stuff, like in a very like fetch the bolt cutters way, where it sounds like banging pots and pans together. Uh, um, so maybe that influenced the popularity of these albums, or maybe they just came at the right time. But yeah, no, I do really feel like with their existed addiction to blood when it came out. I so distinctly remember the Halloween of 2019. It was second year. I was living with my new flatmates. And I really do remember playing this on speakers in the kitchen while we were preparing to watch a spooky film together. I think I really wanted to watch Halloween, John Carpenter's film, but
Mm.
I got overruled and we ended up watching House. Uh,
Oh, I
which
remember
was
this.
such a distinctly different vibe and mood than I was in. Like I just wanted to watch schlock. I didn't want to watch like art. So I was just like, man, I wasn't prepared. You know,
No,
but
no, it was. I remember you were so. I really remember it. Like you were so upset, and I think it was so valid. It was like because it's like you say, it's such a different vibe. Like if they had gone, I'm not in the mood for Halloween, but what about A Nightmare on Elm Street? It's like fine, that's a
yeah,
compromise.
yeah,
House is like, I
yeah.
mean, literally geographically alone,
Like
like a
it is quite a silly, cheesy film, but undeniably, very experimental and challenging in some ways. That I just, wasn't in the mood for that night. But that's beside the point. Uh, and then the next year, when I find There Existed an Addiction to be a very like extensive album. It was very complete and like big,
yeah.
and I was kind of like my appetite for it was completely sated by this one album. I was like, oh, excited for the next thing Clipping do. That was really cool.
Mm,
And then next year they put out like another hour long album, which sounded like pretty much the same, with like songs that were good, but I was so fatigued from the sound.
yeah.
I was like, fuck, dude. So that's why I had like a completely different reaction to you when it came out, because it's kind of like when you watch the I maybe I didn't really feel this way, but when I watched the Breath of the Wild 2 trailer and it just looked like more Breath of the Wild, I was like, fuck, dude, I did like 150 hours of that. I don't think I could do that again. Yeah.
Yeah, I was very much about to spiral us into a Breath of the Wild 2 conversation, like with absolutely no recourse to clipping, so I'm not gonna do that. Uh, I think to get on towards opinions of this album,
Mm.
and like opinions in general, uh, have found that Visions of Bodies Being Burned is kind of withering in the sunlight of the predecessor. Uh, to be honest, I think there's a lot of great stuff on it, but I think there's also a lot more dead weight. I mean, like you say, it's as long. It's if you include well, that's if you don't include piano burning.
Yeah.
Which that's not a knock against piano burning. Um, I will defend piano burning to my death.
I
Because
was tempted to just leave in my notes the only note for piano burning being this is a 17-minute long song of the piano burning. But yeah, there is more to it than that,
every
arguably.
time I come back to this, I'm like, oh my god, yeah, it's 18 minutes. It's 18 minutes, and it's nothing else. I will be honest. I did flick through it at like I've never listened to piano burning all the way through.
Really? Oh
I
man, I yeah. The first time I heard this album, I like saw there was a 17-minute long song called Piano Burning, and I was so excited to hear it. I was like, fuck, dude, a 17-minute long clipping song? Like, what does that sound like? And when it came on, I genuinely sat down intently listening the whole time, and I was so tense because I was like, something's gonna happen. Like, there's gonna be some sort of like audio jump scare. There's gonna be some crazy shit. Like, something is gonna happen at some point. Like, and it was one of the most intense like clipping experiences I've had. Of course, nothing like happened, but like sitting there in fear that something was going to happen was extremely fun.
You've been pranked. You've been pranked. I unfortunately, well, actually, to be honest, kind of fortunately, because I don't think I would have gotten as much out of it as you, had it spoiled by a
Ah,
member of excellent podcast Jar Media that it
mm,
is just an 18-minute long song of a piano burning.
mm.
So I was like, I know you. I had to flick through, like, especially in the last 2 minutes to make sure, yep, there wasn't any music there. And I was like,
There's a cool bit like around 4 minutes in where you can hear like the inner parts of the piano burning, and you know the parts that make the key sounds like start
yeah.
crashing, and they make little stuff that almost sounds like music. I like that bit. I think it's a 250-minute mark. I think I thought it's really good.
I think it has merit. Like I would like if you want to put it on the album, put it on the album. I'm not
Yeah,
like
but you
a
can't put it on at the
the
house party.
physical. Oh yeah, no. You don't want to, you'll scare the hose with piano burning. This is no, yeah, fuck the rest of Clipping's discography. Scare the hose music is just piano burning. Um yeah, I really do mean it though. Like I do think that uh there are weaknesses exposed in Visions of Bodies Being Burnt by this album. I just think that the ambition of that project is a lot more muddy and less grand
Mm,
than their existing addiction to blood.
mm,
And it's I don't know. I think a lot of stuff that I know and enjoy about the first album, excuse me, is brought to light by that first one. Like the strengths of it are definitely heightened by it.
mm. Yeah, and I mean, I agree. I think this album is really good. You know, it's still, you know, compared to the 2014 and 2016 albums,
Mm.
I do prefer those to this. Like those get me in an emotional place that this doesn't really, and that's like kind of the nature of the album. It's going for pure theatrics, and I mean the only track that kind of touches my heart is Attunement. You know, where Daveed Diggs is doing the famous kind of second person raps, telling you, to kill yourself and like, really encouraging you. And it's it that track really gets under my skin. Like, with the lines, you've been saying you wanted to stop. Why don't you take one step and let God, take control of that? And you've been saying you hated the skin. Why are you stuck there? One more step. It really reminds me
Mm.
of like the kind of intensely miserable horror of stuff like Silent Hill 2 or Soma or like an
Yeah.
Ari Aster film where like, yeah, it's spooky, but like the more I think about the actual thing it's about, the sadder I get.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's something that I mean that yeah, that just taps into a lot of horror that I love. That's like what I'm really looking for in a lot of horror films.
Mm,
But I think the thing that I most love about this project is that for me as a group that they just really like enunciate something in horror which is just like a total apathy or even like contempt for just humanity itself. Um, it just how much they relish in its pain. Like the theater, I agree. It's very theatrical and very grand, but there is this genuine just contempt for people and their pain. And on songs like Attunement, I mean that means they can tap into like personal feelings. But on other songs like Blood of the Fang. It can apply to so many different things. Like I just think it's such a powerful theme, and I don't know. I haven't listened to a huge amount of horror themed music before, um, but I think Clipping are just exemplary for taking that aspect of horror that I love so much of
mm,
using like this distaste for people
mm,
and almost reflexively looking at yourself in that way
mm.
and actually making that very personal and very grounded.
Yeah.
I think they do that incredibly.
I think when I compare this to when I introduced this album last week, in terms of like the horrorcore genre, that I compared it to Misfits kind of in terms of like creating these kind of slasher narratives,
Mm.
um, these monster movies of horror songs. I think what differentiates like what Clipping's doing here from stuff like that is it's like overtly political in a way that like
Yeah.
does remind me a lot. Like we were talking a bit about black horror tactics with like the Jordan Peele stuff, and it does remind me a lot of how like Jordan Peele's approach to horror. We're taking traditional horror kind of tropes and narratives and kind of putting that, subverting them in a way that politicizes them. Like for example, nothing is late. Not. Let me drink some water real quick.
That's okay.
I die in the middle of the stream. Like with nothing is safe when which I'll talk more during the favorite tracks portion, but the narrative of like the band talks about how they were going for like the assault on Precinct 13, but in the
Oh
inverse of
yeah.
that, where it's where it's the quote unquote homies hanging out and the police are the ones invading the building, and as well as lots of these songs being about like gang violence and stuff like La Mala or Dina, Club Down, going into kind of normal gangster rap lyrics, but kind of elevating them with framing like the gangsters as these epic horror figures.
Yeah.
And this probably reaches its climax in this kind of line of reasons it reaches its climax in Blood of the Fang, which is overtly talking about like black civil rights leaders coming back as like vengeful vampires and contextualizing the line there existed an addiction to blood with the history of like anti-black violence being the addiction to blood, and part of that contempt being like what you're talking about, the contempt this has for humanity comes from Davida rapping from the perspective of like this historical violence, much like we saw in Candyman. So that dimension like really gives this album legs for me when it comes to like re-listening and the type of horrorcore it's going for.
Yeah, it isn't pulp at all. Like, I mean, I think there is like pulpy imagery used to kind of bring. I mean, yeah, but pulp that still doesn't feel like the right word because it brings so much grandeur, like you said. Like it turns like sort of crime figures into these villains, and so the whole thing has this gravitas. And it's so lifted by the production constantly. Like everything is meshed so well together with how simultaneously beaten down, but also intricate, detailed, and loud and glorious it is. They just have such a presence in how they frame all of their imagery. I don't know. It's all wonderfully on brand. Clipping have such a recognizable style that I think brings so much credit to how they do their music. I think they're just their production is so special.
Yeah, I do agree with saying that it is a bit pulpy. Like songs like The Show, to me doesn't really feel super political, but just explicitly like, isn't it messed up? It feels exploitative in the sense that, not exploitative in like a I'm angry way, but in terms of exploitative fiction, of like, hey, isn't it messed up? There are like places on the dark web where you can watch live streams of murders and like, there's audience input of how you'd like them to die, and it's like a performance. What if we made like a fun horror story about that kind of thing? Like even there's like some lines in this that genuinely remind me of like Eminem, like good Marshall Mathers Eminem when he was doing this kind of like, I'd argue he was doing some horrible stuff with those first two albums. Stuff like, say bro, why's your skin on the floor? Where's your hair? It's nothing but follicles. That's called a close shave, don't y'all suppose? Like that kind of like, it is quite corny and pulpy and playful and funny.
Yeah, exactly.
The way David delivers lines like that. So I do think it does roll around in the mud a bit with just having fun of these like horror concepts. It doesn't feel totally self-serious.
100%. I mean, the show really had me thinking, obviously it's in reference to real life imagery, but it really had me thinking of Hellraiser, and like how the sort of demons in Hellraiser take pleasure in the pain.
I feel like everyone's been talking about, is there a Hellraiser thing happening currently? Because I feel like I keep hearing it coming up.
I know what you mean. I watched it because I kept seeing it come up. Like it was really like one evening we just wanted to watch a movie, and yeah, though there is something is going on with Hellraiser right now because I think Megan Thee Stallion just dressed up as Pinhead. Um, so yeah, I'm sorry to be like part of the Hellraiser cabal because I did literally just watch it a couple weeks ago. Uh, but I was really honestly thinking about that film, listening to
Mm,
this album,
mm,
and especially because I mentioned I feel like this album relishes in pain. But like we talked about, there's a lot of political stuff going on with this album, and I think that's why I have so much respect for it. It's an incredibly brave album.
mm.
It really holds nothing back from how it discusses anything. Like Blood on the Fang is like a very unapologetically radical song, which I feel like it's talking about a lot of movements that could be seen as being in good faith, but it's speaking about them so like dispassionately, which is something that I kind of agree with, to be honest. Like I agree, like the politics of Blood on the Fang is very much one of being anti-violence.
It does the way they frame violence, like yeah, counter violence in a
Exactly.
politically
Yeah. Yeah.
activist way. Does remind me a lot of how like Run the Jewels kind of raps about violence, like the great Killer
Mm.
Mike line. We killing them for freedom because they tortured us for boredom, and if some good ones died, then fuck it, the Lord will sort them. Like there's no
Yeah.
kind of moral superiority. There's very little kind of moral posturing here. It's like there is a brutality to it,
Yeah.
a raw anger.
Yeah. But very justified brutality as well. Very like art like Blood on the Fang is such an articulately counter-violence song. Which I'm getting ahead of myself because I think it's one of my it will be something I talk about in the favorite track section. Um, but it because it's I don't know, I feel like it's such a I can't ignore it, if that makes sense. I can't discredit how open a song it is. I feel like I can't look away from the things he's talking about, especially with bringing up imagery of radical black civil rights leaders. Like all of the people he speaks about are very deliberate people. These are not like, people who sought for compromise or anything like that. These are people who called for radical action. Uh, and I just
Mm,
think it's such a like,
mm.
it's such a portrait of an ideology. Uh, to be honest, I think it's so cohesive and so willing. I
Yeah,
think it's an incredible song.
it's one of the few moments where I think David generally takes. We talked a lot about this album's kind of coldness towards life in a general sense, uh, and I think like the line, now what, now what that tell you about death? Death ain't shit. Like,
Yeah,
in reference to these figures coming back to life and taking vengeance. It is one of the few like uplifting moments where we're using that imagery to
yeah.
say like, hey, you can't kill the movement by killing the people. Like,
I
it's quite beautiful as a claim.
I think it is beautiful, and also one of the first times, or one of the only times where I feel like we're very directly implicated in David Diggs's view. Like the sort of bridges that he keeps coming back to, where he brings up the leaders by name, where he says like, so what y'all talking about? Hands up, don't shoot. I feel like these are just very overt political interjections by the man himself. It doesn't feel like I'm being told a story, uh, which again just adds to the gravitas of this song that I love so much. Uh, and it's just so blunt and to the point. Rhyming phrases like grasp at the root with hands up, don't shoot, um, is just so powerful at exposing the contrast between those things, really. You just can't really ignore the different messaging that those things have. Uh, and I think in light of the other looks a lot worse, really. So yeah, I just think it's like such a well put together song.
I think before we move on to favorite and least favorite tracks, it would be fun to talk about both the intros and the closings of this album with
Oh yeah.
intro and piano burning, unless piano burning is on your favorite track list or
Uh,
non-favorite track list.
no, it's not. Yeah, no, it's not on my least favorite
Is in
track
the
or favorite
neutral
tracks.
zone. Yes. Okay. So with the intro, I do think this is the one thing that Visions of Bodies Being Burnt has over this album. I really like the Visions of Bodies Being Burnt intro. Uh, it's partially justified, however, by like that being a direct continuation from the intro to this album. Like if you queue up the intro from Bodies Being Burnt, it directly follows from this intro.
Oh, that's so.
And
I love
another
that.
aspect is if you've heard the previous clipping projects, every single album opens with an intro of David rapping extremely quickly and then ending with him saying, "It's clipping B word," and that's like the punchline of like that's like the tagline, of the
Oh,
group. And in this song, he doesn't say it's clipping B word, and you have to wait till the next album to get the it's clipping. And even then, it like the B word is cut out by huge noise, which is an amazing moment. But again, like
I
the
love that moment.
clipping album does not feel complete without that line. So in this song, it just leaves me feeling cold, and I was upset. I
Oh,
had to wait a whole year to hear him say
and then you were
catchphrase.
let, and then you were let down. But then also,
There are good songs in the album. I was just so surprised that it was literally this, but more. I was like, oh wow, we're really okay.
we're
But
really
anyway, yeah.
committed. We're really committing to
Do
this
you have any
now.
thoughts of the intro slash all pianos burning?
Um. Well, I kind of just want to discuss like the fact that piano burnings exists. Because I don't know. I feel like it's one of those things that a lot of people are like. A lot of people nowadays would be like, "Oh, why is that there? It's pointless," and that kind of thing. Uh, and it's just it doesn't like I don't love it or anything like I like I said I've never listened to it all the way through, but I'm glad it's there because I feel like if artists weren't allowed to do that kind of thing, then I don't know what it's just art, like just let artists do things. And I don't know, I don't like it when people um call for like weird things artists do that are probably or could be argued to be kind of obnoxious, not to be there just because they don't get anything out of it. Like I don't get anything out of piano burning, but I'm still glad it's there because I'm glad clipping can do whatever they want. Um, so
Hmm.
yeah,
Are
hands
you
off
aware?
piano burning.
Are you aware of the history of piano burning?
No, I'm not aware.
So I did some research on this. This song is actually a cover.
Nah,
Yeah.
nah. What?
Avant-garde artist Anya Lockwood wrote this piece in 1968. It was part of her suite, The Piano Transplants, which the concept was to record the destruction of pianos which were already beyond repair.
Mhm.
And the group has talked about how they like having these kind of like deconstructionist stuff at the end of each album.
Mhm.
Uh, so they're like, shit, what should we do this time? And they're like, oh fuck, we like Annie Lockwood. Let's just cover her song "Piano Burning." We'll take the liner notes for that, which are burn a piano and record it. Basically, that's basically what the liner notes are. And they did it. They burned their own piano and did it. And to them, they also thought it was interesting because they thought it served as like a nice bookmark for Nothing is safe because that starts with like a single piano chord and piano note being played, and here
Mm.
we hear that piano burning. Another cool aspect is the track Prophecy, that interlude, which just sounds like a rustling, is
Oh
actually an
yeah.
edit of the piano burning track at the end. It's a slight
Oh,
alteration,
that's
but
fun.
it's actually a prophecy of this thing coming. So I think I kind of I feel like here in the context of this album, while I would argue probably originally the original piano burning was some sort of complicated avant-garde statement about the boundaries of art, right?
Yeah.
Or a sort of anti-art. Um, I feel like in the
Yeah,
context
very
of this album, it
anti-art.
kind of feels like death, like with the fact that it's foreshadowed throughout the entire thing. And then the attunement ends with, I just see my suicide. Let me just get piano burning. It reminds me a lot of, actually, it reminds me
Mhm.
a lot of the structure of the Microphones album, The Glow Part 2, which ends with My Warm Blood, which is like a minute and a half song followed by pretty much 10 minutes of just hearing just thumping heart getting slower and slower, and horns blaring in the background like a lighthouse kind of horn, and kind
Mm.
of the first couple tracks being subtly played here and there, barely audible. This reminds me a lot of that. It sounds like death, and if you hear the whole thing, there's an old sort of chilling piece to it that maybe death isn't so bad, you know. At least the noise is over. So from that angle, I think piano burning is quite powerful.
Oh yeah. See, that's why I'm glad piano burning is there.
Well, on that note, let's move on to favorite and least favorite tracks. I'll let you kick it off, and if I share any tracks as you, I will just
Hmm.
chime in after you're done.
Okay, awesome. I'll start with Blood on the Fang, which I feel like I've talked enough about. I guess instrumentally, I really like the gospel elements that are brought into it in the samples. I think it just brings um, a kind of more human and compassionate slant to the song than the rest of the album. Because it does stand out, this song, thematically, and like I said, from the sort of storytelling perspective that we've got on the rest of the album, which I think is part of what makes it such a powerful song. That's not to say that using horror storytelling on the rest of the album in an abstract way is any less powerful as a means of political messaging. I just think Blood on the Fang's bluntness and direction, and the fact that it's so clearly coming from David Diggs's own perspective, it just makes it a really powerful song. So yeah, Blood on the Fang. It's one of my favorites. Um,
One thing I'll say about Blood
yeah.
of the Fang, it's not on my favorites, but you mentioned the gospel, and I really think this sounds a lot like an Algiers song, if anyone's a fan of that band, with
Oh
blending like
yeah.
gospel with like industrial spooky music. It really had that good vibe.
I really need to go back to Algiers. I listened to them years ago.
Great
And wasn't
band.
really into it, but I think I was just silly back then. I
Yeah,
think I was a bit young.
that's probably what happened. Joking around, joking
Yeah,
around.
no, don't play around because it was probably a silly move. I was just being goofy. Um, Next up is Club Down. I think David Diggs is like dominating anthemic vocals in the hook are so enthralling. I think it's such a gripping and enthralling song. I don't know. I think that they build worlds so well on this album. I think this is something that I have spoken about enough. But in their stories, while there are these characters kind of contribute to this wider feeling of scope. Um, and with the instrumental being so visceral and loud and grand, there is this vastness to this song that is really incredible. And politically, I think it has a lot of really interesting things to say about like social spaces and social space invasion. Similarly to in Nothing Is Safe, uh, what that's like when that's invaded by whatever means, really. And especially with especially in the last verse, when David Diggs starts saying that gangster shit, and keeps repeating that phrase, and it feels almost mocking. It feels like he's kind of getting at the heart of like that kind of iconography, really. And then contrasting it with lines like, um, you could put it in the blood or you could put it in the lungs, but whatever you could cough up, remember that it all begun with that gangster shit. And he goes back into sort of like drawlingly repeating that phrase again. And yeah, I feel like it's just getting to the heart of that kind of damage,
Hmm.
in that kind of, but in that that kind of the kind of damage that it does in social spaces. And I just think it's a really like beautiful song. I think it's just really devastating.
Yeah, if anyone's interested in more about like clubs as like social spaces and the politics of that. There's a really great essay by Mark Fisher called Baroque Sunburst. It was covered on Acid Horizon, really good podcast called Solidarity at the Rave. That's the name of the episode. And yeah, just really cool stuff about the idea of the rave being like a political space and kind of like,
Yeah,
cops famously shutting down illegal raves being this weird like neoliberal desire to like, control people to like a libidinal level. Uh, you know, very, very, very strange British politics, right?
yeah.
Yeah. No,
It's
I
a
love that
politi-
as a concept.
it's a politics I'm like constantly concerned with as well because
Mm.
um
Especially with like the cornerstone event for LGBTQ
yeah,
politics,
no, exactly.
Stonewall is like an example of this.
It's why I'm so passionate about it, and it's why I'm so like glad there's a song like this on this album because I think for all peoples, all marginalized peoples, um, the way in which we choose to escape from feeling a victim in societies that hate us, or not, well, not just hate us, but consistently marginalize and oppress us, uh, is always going to be political, and I think it's really important to constantly interrogate our social spaces in that line, in that light.
Mm.
Like I just think it's something that should, while yes, they should be a safe haven. I think they should also be like thoroughly politically examined by our own people, uh, and like it. Yeah, just mainly in the light of how we're treated by the rest of society.
Yeah, Calm Down is also one of my favorite tracks.
Oh hell
You've
yeah!
covered it pretty thoroughly. But one thing I would like to note that you did not know is I love the agonizing screams which are weaved through the harsh rumbling drone of this track. And this is, like you said, David's best vocal performance of the album. It's incredibly intense. And that
Mm.
hook, that all the money in the world ain't gonna stop none of that gangster shit,
Gangsta
that,
shit.
man, that goes so ham. Like, it's a really fun song.
It is really fun. It is really fun. And yeah, really powerful as well. And last up, another shared favorite track, with Nothing Is Safe, which I feel like is a surefire for like anyone, because I just think this is indefiably a incredible song. Genuinely up there, like in songs of the decade. I don't know. I just think it's maybe not that high, but I think it's fan fucking tastic. I think it's beautiful, and devastating and difficult, to grapple with. I think the way it sets up itself at the beginning, the imagery of like the imagery of the building they're in. I am really glad that Assault on Precinct 13 was an inspiration for this because I really had imagery like that in my mind whenever I listen to this song of like a sort of rickety old building. You've got like a sort of ragtag group of people in like with some weapons stuck inside, just sort of waiting for something to happen. Um, and the way it's so all of a sudden devastatingly blown asunder, by David Diggs's rapping, when he introduces drop the lights, drop low, something shot from the trees, went straight through the front door, homie dropped to his knees. It's so sudden, and beautiful with the flow. I just think, well, it is cinematic.
Mm.
It's which is a phrase I don't use as a sort of synonym for good, but it's genuinely just such vivid imagery and I would say the best actual storytelling on the album. It's such a great song. I love it so much.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite tracks too. And again, further proof that the Soul and Precinct 13 is a aesthetic masterpiece and beautiful and inspiration for all art to come afterwards.
Hell yeah.
Uh, uh, I'm never gonna live that down. But the hook is fantastic. Like, I really had the line, but it truly doesn't give a fuck. It's here to make you understand that nothing is safe, nothing is sacred, nothing to pray for, nothing is. Such a good hook, especially talking about like cops invading
Yeah.
a space as we did with Club Down. um, and the constant reminder that your life ain't worth shit. You are Homo Saka. There's a great line. The bleak cynicism of this album really shines through. The line, "You all are dying, and really, will anyone care? Truth, like death, comes for everyone." Like there's a real indifference here, which captures you know, frames that type of political violence in a way that I appreciate. Another thing I note is, you know, uh, when the beat kind of drops at 2 minutes in,
Mm.
it kind of sounds like Stranger Things a little bit. It made me think of Stranger Things,
Yeah, it's like
but that's okay.
that's okay. I think strange. Oh
Is it that
god.
it sounds like Stranger Things, or that Stranger Things sounds like John Carpenter? Because there is literally nothing original in that show.
No, that's exactly what I was gonna say. Is Stranger Things sounds like John Carpenter, but like a modern version where it's like, but now it's loud and we've got big
Yeah.
synths and we're gonna do a grand thing. Um, and so
Also,
yeah, I think it does sound like Stranger Things, but it just has like patience and build up.
Also, I love the narrative momentum in the moment. It just really this like made me
Yeah,
this looked like a shot from Evil Dead 2 in my head. It felt so Sam Raimi
yeah,
with phone that no one should call starts ringing one time, all the homies slide to it, then the wall split from the outside and air rushes in, it's cold as fuck, bullets slapping like hell, more homies struck down, mission has failed. Like I can see the Sam Raimi shot of like the close up to everyone's eyes turning to the phone, and then the wall coming down on like the kind of claymation, you're blowing of all the
yeah,
wind blowing all the objects in the room. I can just see that image so vividly. It's such a great narrative
yeah.
accomplishment. This song is.
That's what I mean by cinematic is
Hmm.
it's not stills. It's like I can see everything moving together. In the way David raps it, like it just all has this momentum that goes together so well.
But yeah, what's your least favorite track? And then and
Oh
then
yeah,
I'll just say
my
my tracks after that.
my least favorite track is Attunement. If I'm honest, I didn't get the same things out of it that you did, but in all honesty, I just hadn't looked at it in the same way that you had. For me, it was just the least emotional, sorry, the least instrumentally inspiring song of them all. Um, I don't have an awful lot to say about it. It's just truthfully the song that I went back to the least. Uh, and I just found it fairly underwhelming as a closer. But everything that you said about it was beautiful and sounded genuinely fascinating. So I kind of regret my decision. And the way I kind of regret the way I looked at it before, but that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I like Achievement, but that's okay. I agree that instrumentally it is like not a huge standout.
It's
Um,
just the way I listen to
yeah.
music. I kind of need a lot of the time. I need that hook that keeps me that gets me to come back and dig into it deeper. And it didn't
Mm.
have that viscerality to get me coming back, basically.
Fair enough. I find it very visceral because it's the V telling me to fucking kill myself for 3 minutes. But anyway, to move on to my favorite tracks, the only one that I have that you did not bring up is La Mala or Dina, which
Mm.
for you, Tilly is a film student, so you film students at home may recognize this title from a little film called The Italian Connection.
Connection.
Is
I
that
don't know
right?
it though. Yeah, that's right. I had never seen it though.
Yeah, my one of
So I'm
those.
a
I
failed
assume
film
it's like a
student.
gangster movie, right? About Italians doing gangster shit. Anyway,
Yeah, you fucking hate movies anyway, so
yeah, films are bad. Anyway, so yeah, this is a great song. I, it's a great kind of posse cut where, like I said before, the gangster rap shit is elevated into like complete and utter terror. I
mm,
love my favorite aspect of. I love how the song builds. Each verse that comes in, a new instrumental element is introduced, which like increases intensity. And
mm.
also, I love how David's verse just descends into like blaring noise. It's
It's
extremely
awesome.
satisfying for
It's
me. It's
so
so
satisfying.
climactic. I love it.
It's so visceral. It's so good.
And then my least favorite track is Story 7. So this continues the story series, which has been built up through each clipping project. It's called Story 7 because it's the seventh installment of
Of
the story
story.
series. Uh, the hook is great, the Cynthia, and then describing the things that Cynthia is doing. The beat is okay, it fits the album. It's very minimalist, but yeah, it's not one that like massively stands out to me. It is just
Hmm.
quite fitting. And yeah, these are all the stories are obviously narratively driven songs. But I feel like this is very familiar ground for clipping. It reminds me a lot of the track "Body and Blood" from the self-titled album, which also that track follows a cannibalist picking up and seducing someone, and this is like kind of the same thing, except I guess it's a vampire. It's more focused on like drinking the blood. But
Right.
again, it just felt like familiar ground. I was like, yeah, we've done this. We've done this. They kind of
That's
prefer Body and Blood anyway.
that's a fair criticism as a more general clipping fan. Yeah.
Another thing is sheer laziness. Every time a clipping album comes out, there's a new story, and I know that they connect. Like for example, there is a character here that is reoccurring with one that came before, but I just don't want to sit down and listen to all the stories and like piece them together. So I kind of in my head decide I'm just not gonna like think too hard about the story track because I don't want to do the work of like connecting the clipping cinematic universe. So so that's just a completely like bullshit reason that I've kind of like sidelined that track. Anyway, would you recommend the album?
Yeah, I'd give this a strong recommend. I think it's great. I think it's a really beautiful, but also difficult album. I think it constantly offers more to people who dig more into it, while also being an incredibly viscerally and delightfully punishing album. So yeah, I think it's great.
Awesome, yeah, and I too, I'd give this like a strong recommend. I think on the scale with other clipping albums, maybe it would be decent, but on a scale with like normal albums, it's definitely strong recommend. Like this is
Yeah,
a fantastic project,
it's just so
and
good.
I love it for all the reasons stated, and it's very fun to listen to this on Halloween. So we're getting this episode out very soon,
Oh
in
yeah.
time for Halloween period. So hopefully, folks at home can vibe to this. What are we doing next week as we leave Spooktober?
Oh, yep. Oh, let me get my episode plan up. It will literally. I know what we're doing. I just need to
It's
get my
El
plan.
Mariachi.
Oh, cool.
Two, the
Yeah,
novel, the other
yeah,
one.
cool.
There's a
Next,
Desperado. I don't know.
yeah,
Fucking.
one of those. Yeah. With next week we're talking about Desperado, the sequel to El Mariachi. So that'll be the second installment of our Robert Rodriguez, uh, mariachi trilogy series. So yeah.
Yeah, sweet. So El Desperado and keep it spooky, for like a week longer, right? Yeah.
Happy Halloween, everyone.
Goodbye.